So this project is, it's people who came to my talk yesterday, I was talking about this larger research centre around the Young and Well. It's called the Young and Well Cooperative Research Centre, and this project is also part of that centre. It's part of our larger goal to sort of look at ways that technology can improve wellbeing, and this corner of it is obviously in the games component. And we're doing a whole bunch of things in that space, and this is an area that's led by a PhD student, Kelly, as was mentioned. And we're doing a bunch of stuff around this, but we're a bit out of order like we were with the paper I was talking about yesterday, and that because of the way the staffing's set up, we couldn't start with focus groups and interviews on this, so we thought, well, we'll start surveying people who play games and see what we can learn from that, then we'll loop back to some of the other stuff. So the idea here was we were working with a large games development company, and we thought we were going to get about 5,000 people for the survey, but we got 429. So it turns out gamers don't like spending that much time answering surveys, but it was enough to do what we wanted, get an idea of what we wanted to do. This is a little older sample than the project wanted, but for the purposes of this study, they're 26 years old, but a standard deviation of about 8 years. So kind of a lot of uni students in the sample, but also a lot of people that we drew off different forums and discussion boards we lured them with vouchers for video game stores. And we asked them to think about their behaviour in relation to their most recently purchased game. We've previously done a lot of work in this space talking to people about their current favourite game, which is great because they're very passionate about it, but you tend to get ceiling effects on a lot of the measures of the pens because it's your favourite game. So you feel really competent at it, you find it's full of autonomy, and so we wanted to, and I should clarify, we did in the end change it to most recently acquired game or most recently played game, because we realised some people were treating most recently purchased game too literally, and not all of them purchase all the games that they play. So we learnt that lesson. But rather than their favourite game, and it had to be, I'm not going to recall exactly, but they had to play, have played it a certain minimum amount. So if you bought it that morning and you haven't played it, obviously we're not going to ask you about it, and you've only played it once, we won't ask you about that. But I forget, it's in the paper. I think it was played at least a couple of times. So the measures that we took were amount of play. Is something weird happening? Yes. I feel like I'm going insane. Ah, there you go. All right. I mean, I knew I'd had a little bit to drink last night, but I was like, is someone messing with me? Okay, so we wanted to, a lot of the focus in this area is about amount of play. And as probably many of you are aware, there's a lot of research looking at how many hours of play is too much and that sort of thing. And the research that I've seen that's most convincing lately is the stuff that shows this really nice curvy linear relationship amongst school kids. So if you're not playing at all or you're playing too much, your well-being's not great. And if you're playing in the middle, you tend to have better well-being. That's not to say this, obviously we can't assume causation there, you know what I mean? So it might just, you can't say then that it's playing those games that are making those kids have better well-being, but it may well be that those kids are the ones that are more integrated into their social groups and those sorts of things. So we wanted to include amount of play in here. We also wanted to look at genre of games because we're constantly hearing in the media and certainly in some research that certain genres of games or certain specific games might be worse for us than others. League of Legends and World of Warcraft being the obvious targets for that sort of attention. And the problem for us was with the sample of 429, we didn't, I think I had about 16 or 17 genres, which was just too many to really look at in any useful way. So we scaled them up into, for want of a better word, meta genres, and they were very, as you'd expect, you know, you put your action RPG with your action adventure game, you put your massively multiplayer online games with something else that I forget, but your strategy games together, they clumped in very sensible, meaningful ways. Again, detailed in the paper, but there's nothing fancy going on there. We're really just putting, you know, similar game genres together. And in fact, in another talk, I'd rant to you about how the notion of genre is kind of useless and we need to move forward into another way of classifying games. But for our purposes here, we just built sort of 4 or 5 categories that pretty coherently locked in some genres. The mode of play stuff, and this is where I want to tack on the end because we're still wrestling with this moving forward, but for this study, for mode of play, we asked them, did you play offline with people you know? So we're looking at, you're playing in your home with people you know, online with people you know, online with people you don't know, or on your own. So we're trying to look at what is the impact of, how you play and whether it's with others, and are they others you know, and is it online or offline? Halfway through the survey, we realised we really want to know about cooperative and competitive play as well, but it was too late, so that's where we're going to move next. We put the flow state scale in. I imagine many people are familiar with that. It's I forget her first name, Sue Jackson's scale. It costs money to use it, but I think we've had really good results with it. It does seem to be a very effective measure of flow. And the pens, which I don't need to explain as it's been ably done for me. Thank you. And the Wellbeing measure we put on there was the mental health continuum short form scale. It's 10 or 12 items. It's a well-known scale in the space. It gives you sort of a broad, actually, am I lying to you there? I might be lying. It might be the one with, it's short, but it gives you psychological, emotional, and social well-being, as well as a total measure. And I think, the forthcoming paper looks at them broken down. This just looks at total. So, to try and tackle this and look at what was the strongest predictor of that measure of well-being, and let's be clear, it's our measure of well-being. It's not it's as good as it is. It's a good measure, but it's not, to be overestimated, I guess. But we wanted to sort of, to get a sense of, for this study, we wanted to be able to say, after you take out the effect of age and gender, and after you take out the effects of genre, and after you take out the effects of hours of play, is there an impact of mode of play, which is who you're playing with stuff, and is there an impact of the pens and flow stuff? And that's so we did a hierarchical multiple regression to tackle that. And so each of those steps, what that just means is, in a 2-minute description of hierarchical multiple regression, which I'm sure you're all fascinated to enter into, 30-second version, when you put a step in, it accounts for all the variance associated with that before you look at what the next step is doing. So it also tells you which steps were predictive. So only steps 4 and 5 in the overall regression equation predict total well-being. So what that basically it means for us is that, although there's one exception to this that I won't try and explain statistically, but age and gender weren't a big deal, genre is not a big deal, hours of play, none of those things are predicting well-being. What is coming out is the mode of play and the play experience. And more specifically, and this is this anomalous result that I'll ignore for a minute, but what we found was playing offline with friends, relatedness and flow were the things that predicted your well-being in this situation. Now, the limitations of this sort of work become quite stark here. I think it's interesting and informative, but it's a survey about the last game you purchased with retrospective measures. So those are not hugely high numbers, but in the context of what we're doing, they're statistically significant and also, I think, interesting to note. And what's very encouraging from our point of view is that, again, ignoring age for just a minute, relatedness is the strongest predictor we're seeing of your overall well-being. So that's relatedness as measured by the player experience of need satisfaction. So how connected you feel to the other people you're playing with or to other people while you're playing, because the authors believe you can use that scale for single-player games. And again, that's probably a sidebar conversation, but your level of connectedness with other people, your relatedness, is predicting well-being the most. The age result, which we've discussed quite a bit, given the age of the sample, I wonder if it's just reflecting that when you get a little bit out of your early 20s, you get a little bit less angsty, and maybe your well-being just goes up anyway. I can't find a reference for that, although I'm sure there is one out there. Like, you talk to anyone, they're like, yeah, my early 20s were a bit of a mess, but sort of, my overall kind of... So I think that's all that is. But irrespective, with the stats we've done, these effects are all independent of each other. So you can in a way ignore that and still know that these are all predicting well-being to the extent that is detailed there. So our overall interpretation of that is what you play and how much you play are not as important as who you play with and your experience while playing. That's the other thing I didn't really discuss, flow, but we know flow has been shown to be related to well-being in a huge variety of fields. So it's not shocking that experiencing flow when you play would predict well-being. So some interesting things that were absent though. We didn't get an impact of playing online with people you know, which I was a little surprised at. We got a prediction of playing at home with your friends, good for your well-being. I don't want to conclude from this study that playing online with people you know isn't good for you. It certainly feels like something that's good for your well-being to me, and when you talk to people about it. But this is a particular sample, so I don't know that there needs to be further replication of this before I'd even stand by it. But you could interpret this as suggesting that the actual co-location of people in a room is a key part of the well-being benefits of video game play. I'm hesitant to state that with any greater confidence than you could if you squint maybe say this thing, partly because I don't like it as a result, but also because I think it's too early to say that. The lack of connection between hours of play and well-being I think is really notable and quite important. We found no relationship at all between how much you play and your well-being. Now, the qualifier there is I think we had a fairly well-being-ish sample. You're talking about people who are got their lives enough to the point to turn up to a university lecture occasionally, or they're involved in a community online. So I don't know that there would be, arguably there's a sample of gamers who are engaging in a very unhealthy way with video games. I don't think we sampled those people. So it may well be that, had we got those people, we'd got a very strong prediction of hours of play. So again, I love that we got no impact of hours of play, but I think the best you can say is for a reasonably healthy group, more hours of play did not have a negative impact on well-being, or for that matter, a positive impact on well-being. We're doing a much larger scale study, I should say, so that I can answer some of these questions that I'm throwing up. It doesn't seem like there are bad games per se, or at least bad game genres. We thought there might be, MMORPGs might show up or something like that, but nothing even trending towards predicting well-being. I do also wonder there if we could get right down to specific games, whether we'd see a different result, but our sample size precluded sort of breaking it down that far. So this is me tying this back to gamification because I thought I should have a slide that tied it to gamification. So build games and applications that involve or promote relatedness or flow is my link to gamification. And that's not entirely flippant. Like I think I was very encouraged by Amy Jo's talk because it really, I think a theme that's emerging across a lot of the work I'm reading and that I'm seeing is that connection with other people is hugely important. And I think that's a huge result out of what we've done. And we've got a much more detailed version of this paper coming out soon. And that certainly keeps showing up. The relatedness and the connection to other people keeps being important. And it's showing up also in other research we're doing. So from here, we're moving on to a much larger, more detailed survey. We want to get stuck into the mode of play measure we used, I think is very blunt. I think whether you're playing cooperatively or competitively or a mixture of both is something we need to get into. And we're struggling at the moment with how to pull that measure apart. So if there aren't good questions, I'm going to ask you guys a question about how to define that variable, but I'll throw to questions now.